Well, we are on to week 4. It is Derek here from the Fantasy Flyer, and I'm dropping in with 3 more starts and 3 more sits for this Sunday's matchups, Sunday and Monday, technically. After last Sunday, I would call the Fantasy Flyer 14 out of 18 when it comes to our starts and sits, which is a pretty good percentage. I'm not afraid to say we haven't been perfect, but honestly, 14 out of 18 is pretty good. So I'm hoping that we will be able to increase that to at least 19 out of 24. That'd be nice. I've been home all week with COVID. Don't worry, I'm fine. But it gave me some extra time to look into the picks that you're about to hear. So without further ado, give this video a like, a subscribe, share, tell your friends about us because we're trying to lead you down the pathway to fantasy righteousness. So let's kick it off with our starts of the week. Get it started, get it started, get it started. Let's get it started. Let's get it started. Start number 1, Najee Harris, running back, Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll get the difficult one out of the way because I am slightly nervous about putting this in my starts. Let's talk about the facts after 3 weeks. Najee Harris has not been outstanding by any means. But then again, neither have the Pittsburgh Steelers as an offense specifically. Uh, this matchup does look tender enough, however. Pittsburgh takes on the Houston Texans and were pretty bad against the run last year. And to be honest, that's probably the only part of their defense that hasn't greatly improved. The Texans beat the Jaguars 34-17. They got a couple turnovers off of the Jaguars last week. Houston has given up 7 rushing touchdowns, which is the most in the league through 3 weeks. And they're allowing 4.3 yards per carry, which is only about half a yard better than they were last year, and it's only 20th best in the league. Najee needs a good game, and I'm going to put some Fantasy Flyer faith in him here. He's a great back when he gets into rhythm, and I like the opportunity that he has this week. I expect the game to be rather close. Again, Pittsburgh's offense generally struggles, and I expect Najee to be able to churn out 70 or 80 yards, even if Jaylen Warren continues to see 30 or 40%, because I think Jaylen Warren can also get 50 or 60 yards. The Texans aren't amazing, and this is an opportunity for both backs, but Najee specifically. Floor for him, in my opinion, about 10 points. If he finds the end zone, ceiling could be in the 17 to 18 range. Start number 2, Christian Kirk, wide receiver, Jacksonville Jaguars. Speaking of the Jacksonville Jaguars, here's a team that really needs to get their offense churning. They've only put up 26 points in their last 2 games, which is problematic enough, especially against a Texans team that put up 34 on them, and then the Chiefs, who only scored 17 but limited them to 3 field goals. They take on Atlanta overseas. It's, the Wembley matchup, the first in the London series, Jaguars and Falcons. And the Falcons is technically one of the best pass-catching defenses, but a deeper dive reveals some interesting differences. Atlanta's only allowed 510 total yards, which is 4th fewest in the league. In total pass defense, they're also 4th, and in rush defense, they're 9th overall. So you would think that if their pass defense was 4th and their rush defense would be 9th, that maybe, if anybody, Travis Etienne would be here. Not quite. They've only allowed 1 rush touchdown all year. However, through 3 games, they've allowed 5 passing touchdowns. They've allowed 117 yards per game rushing, which is 15th in the league at 4.2 yards per carry. But to sum it up, they aren't good in the red zone when it comes to passing. And I think this is where the Jacksonville Jaguars need to improve. Now throw in an opponent who's itching to regain the pass attack, of course, and I like the chances for this to be a rebound game in the terms of the Jaguars scoring 24 or 28 points. Trevor Lawrence has to limit his turnovers, let's be honest, but it should be a good scoring game, and I'll take the Kirk average of 14 projected fantasy points roughly, and that's a good enough place for me to start. If he finds the end zone and can get 6 or 7 catches, this could be a 20-point game for him. Start number 3, DJ Chark, wide receiver, Carolina Panthers. All right, so I'm reaching deep in the cookie jar for this one. Let's be honest, okay? The unfortunate thing about this matchup between Carolina and Minnesota is that it could be really high scoring, or it could be a dud. Both offenses tend to sputter at times. But here's my logic to this. To start, number one, Adam Thielen is first on the Carolina offense. Makes sense. Thielen coming off a huge game against Seattle, Minnesota would probably, like most defenses, try and take away your number one option, especially when they know what you're capable of, the situation in which Adam Thielen is exactly in. Next, there's injury concerns elsewhere for Carolina. Jonathan Mingo is questionable as of this filming, and Terrace Marshall isn't fully dependable, nor is Laviska Shenault to step up and take 4, 5, 6 carries. Most of the time, in any way. That leaves Chark to be the slight beneficiary of the circumstances in a plus matchup for the most part. Vikings have allowed 76% pass completion rate, which is second in the league. They've allowed over 1,100 yards and 7 passing touchdowns through 3 games. I feel like Chark is a solid flex option with wide receiver 2 ceiling. I expect his floor to be somewhere around 7 or 8 points and his ceiling 15 or so.
Oh, tell 'em be humble. Sit down. Be humble. Sit down. Be humble.
Sit number 1, DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver, Tennessee Titans. As the fantasy owner in my dynasty league of DeAndre Hopkins, this kind of hurts me to write because I got him on a cheap contract, but he just hasn't produced this year. He's not scored more than 14 points in standard PPR formats in any of the 3 games, and in 2 of them he scored less than 10. The Bengals and Titans game this Sunday isn't figuring to be a high scoring affair, but if both offenses are sputtering like this, there's no reason to put trust in him. Both quarterbacks have been off, Joe Burrow and Ryan Tannehill. Granted, I'm not saying anything about, Jamar Chase or Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins. The Bengals have to get going at some point. But as for the Titans, Ryan Tannehill could be a bench piece somewhere else in 3 weeks. Hopkins is suffering a lot with him there. It's just not a stellar situation. As for the Bengals, they have been very solid defensively, especially outside man coverage, which is kind of where DeAndre Hopkins likes to feast. And he hasn't been feasting this year. I'm taking the defensive side. I think this is going to be a low scoring game. Total for this game, in my opinion, probably 34 to 40 points. Not something I really want a piece of. I'm erring on the side of caution, and I'm finding a waiver piece in place of Hopkins in case he puts up the 7 or 8 points like I expect him to do for the 3rd week in a row. Sit number 2, Rachaad White, running back, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I'm going off what I've seen with the Saints defense and what the stats say. The Saints defense doesn't allow a lot of rush yards or opportunities for the running backs, despite Rachaad White having over 70% snaps and 100% of goal line opportunities. And even with all of that said about Rachaad White, he's like the RB20 in standard PPR formats. He's riding like a 1 game out of the 3 that has been extremely productive. Anyway, the Saints have only allowed 290 total yards to the running back position through 3 games, and they haven't allowed a touchdown. The only rushing touchdown was to a quarterback, not to a running back. With White looking like a solid fantasy option through 3 games, and this being a storied interdivision rivalry, both teams will probably play up. And this is a spot where I see the Saints keeping Tampa Bay in check, specifically on the run game. I'm projecting White's ceiling to be about 13 fantasy points, and if you can avoid him, I wouldn't start him. Sit number 3, James Conner, running back, Arizona Cardinals. So while this is a bit of a low-hanging fruit, which, I tend to throw one in every single week, James Conner really is like the only consistent engine for the Arizona Cardinals offense. Yeah, Josh Dobbs had a great week last week against the Cowboys, but James Conner was also absolutely stellar. Going into this week, however, 2 words, San Francisco. They've only allowed 150 yards or so on the ground. Not great. They'll probably be leading most of the game, which will force them to throw, which James Conner is involved in the pass game. Let's not say that he's not. But after the matchup with Dallas last week, I know Arizona's kind of flying high, and the 49ers still look absolutely stellar. I think if you're going to take out a game player here, it's going to be James Conner, especially if you're San Francisco and you're that defensive line, Javon Hargrave, Dre Greenlaw, stuff like that. And then as far as him getting more than 20 yards in a carry at any given point, might be very difficult. My ceiling for him is about 11 points. maybe 12, and I don't think Arizona scores more than 14 or 17 in this entire matchup. I would sit James Conner. That's going to wrap up week 4 starts and sits from the Fantasy Flyer. Let us know in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Who are you starting? Who are you sitting? Who is the Muffin Man? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Some of these questions will be answered on Sunday, the latter two, unlikely. However, if you've made it this far in the video, leave us a like, a subscribe, share, and as always, have a good Fantasy Sunday. Take care, guys.